bit by bit. This is the 8th of our digital talks here at Asfar. Today, as Michael has already said, we've got Michael Deriaz from Friends of Kipkelion on their work to eradicate FGM in Kenya. We will be recording the talk so that afterwards we can hopefully have it available for anyone who wants to follow it up. But we will be doing a talk from Michael, followed by some questions if anyone has any for him. And I think if you want to head off, Michael, and
okay,
start.
let's begin. Okay, so eradicating FGM in Kipkelion, Kenya. Well, first of all, this is Kenya. As you probably all know, it's a country in East Africa. It's about the size of France, and the population is about 50 million. And it's probably one of the less poor countries in Africa in many ways. It's a very nice place in a lot of ways. Now, the capital is Nairobi. You can see Nairobi there on the map. And if you go slightly left from Nairobi on the map and slightly upwards, you see a place called Kericho. And that's the area we're talking about. That's the Kipkelion area. And that's where my organization is working. Now, this is what Kipkelion looks like. And perhaps it's not what you imagine when you think about Africa, because it's a mountainous area, it's a high altitude, and it rains a lot. And so it's very green, very fertile, which is great because it means there's a lot of food. It's quite easy to grow food. And so very few people are hungry in Kipkelion. But because of the mountains, it's also a bit difficult for people to travel around. And because of the rain, sometimes there's a lot of mud. And so for that reason, it's a bit isolated. And there's also a lot of people there. There's 300,000 people living in this area, which is maybe 2,000 square miles. So quite heavily populated for a country area. All these people having small farms and trying to survive by growing their own food. Now, one of the features of this area is that people still practice FGM, female genital mutilation, sometimes known as female genital cutting or female circumcision. And it's a long tradition. It's nothing to do with any religion. It's not connected with Islam or Christianity in any way. It's simply the tradition that they have followed for hundreds of years. It's been made illegal by the government of Kenya. So it's a criminal offense to do it, but still it continues because in these remote areas of the country, the police can't do very much. So every year in Kipkelion, there are at least 4,000 girls who come of age. They become women, and that's the age at which traditionally they would suffer female genital mutilation when they're around 12, 13 or 14 years old. And traditionally they would be cut and then they would get married at the age of 12, 13 or 14. So not only do they get mutilated, they also finish their schooling, their education at a very early age. And so that's another reason why it's very, very harmful to these girls to have FGM. Now these are some of the tools that we found that are used for FGM. Now don't worry, this is the only frightening slide, I hope, that I'm going to show you. But you can see it's pen knives, razor blades, horrible rusty things. So it's also very dangerous because it's unhygienic. And often the girls will be infected and sometimes they die. But of course, that's not the reason, that's not the only reason we're against this practice. Even if it was done in a hospital, we would still think it was the wrong thing to do because it's a mutilation and because it's associated with controlling young women and then making them get married when they're too young. Now, what we learned from the local people in Kipkelion was that the best thing to do was to replace FGM with something else. So instead of just saying, don't do that, we say, do this instead. So if you want to celebrate the fact that the girls are becoming women, you have to have something positive that you can do in place of FGM. And this has to be done by the local community themselves, not by people from outside, not just by people coming from outside the area. So we decided that we would help the local people to develop what we call an alternative rite of passage, an alternative way of celebrating that the girls have become women. And so this would replace FGM. So the local people, some of them got together with our help. Some of them were teachers, some of them were nurses, some of them were on the board of management of a local school, and they tried to devise a way of celebrating the fact that the girls were becoming women that was culturally acceptable to the people, which really embodied the best of their own traditions, but without cutting anybody. So here they are working on that. And they planned it all themselves. They knew, because they were the local people, where were the areas where there was still a big risk of FGM, which village were they still doing this practice. And they call these areas the hot spots for FGM. So they identify the hot spots, and then they plan to hold the alternative rite of passage in those places. And the team we had, local people, they were very dedicated and they were very determined to finish FGM completely. This was the poster that they made for their office. So we trained 70 local people to be the leaders and trainers to run the courses for the girls and to advocate and teach people that FGM was wrong. And so then they went out into the community during the year. They would go to all sorts of events, such as weddings, funerals, markets, and they would speak up and say, we want to tell you, don't do FGM, instead we have something better. And so here, this is somebody making a speech at the opening of a new water scheme where we provided clean water for the village, and everyone came along to celebrate. So it was a great moment to get hold of the microphone and say, stop doing FGM, right? So any opportunity, any community gathering is a good time for this process of what we call sensitization of the community. And then later in the year, we say, okay, you've heard that FGM is bad, so instead send your daughter to this course for the alternative rite of passage. And the young girls come, it's in the school holidays, they will go to a primary school and they will be camping or staying in the primary school for a week. And so there's somebody there who will teach them what they need to know in order to be an adult, in order to be a woman. And it's good fun for the young people. So this is a sample of what is on the menu for the course. They are taught, the traditions of their own area, their own people. They're taught about things like taboos, and they're also taught about relationships. And they also make friends during the course as well, which is very nice for them. And they're staying in the school. This is a dormitory in the school. It's quite basic, not very comfortable, but they find it great. It's enjoyable for them, very, very good fun to stay overnight and with their friends during the course. Here is one of these facilitators from the course, and you'll see she's wearing a T-shirt that says in the Swahili language of Kenya, no more FGM. And on the sleeve, there is the logo of the UK aid program, because the UK aid program gave us a lot of money towards this project. So the girls, as I said, they learn about relationships, they learn about health, they learn that they should not get married to somebody because they are forced to get married. They must enter into relationships on the basis of equality, and they should make sure that their education is complete before they get married. At the end of the course, the girls are given a certificate, and this says, you know, you have, congratulations, you have graduated, and now you are an adult, you are a woman. And then there is a big celebration. It's very important. We have the local people, the relatives, families. We have the local chief of the village, the headmaster, and the elders of the community. They will come and they will also declare that the girls are now adults. And so this completely replaces the need for FGM. So after we've done this, we do a survey and we say, what do you think now about FGM? And usually people are very clear. They want to forget about FGM. They will not do it anymore because they understand that it is a very bad thing. So far, this whole program has been quite successful. And then it's time to start planning. We evaluate the work we've done and start planning the next year's campaign, because it's an annual cycle. The traditional time of year for FGM in Kenya is December, which is when the school holidays take place and after the harvest. And so that's the time of year that we run these alternative courses. And this man, he's amazing. He's on fire, really doing his best to organize so that there is no more FGM in the area. So we think that soon we will reach the point where there is no more FGM in that area. Already there are very few girls who suffer it, but we cannot be too complacent about it. Sometimes they go away to stay with relatives in another place, and while they are staying with their grandmother or their aunt in another area, they will suffer FGM. So we have to be very careful. And we need to expand the work we're doing into the surrounding districts. So everyone who is doing this really is a volunteer. So that means it's very cheap to do it. But of course, there are still some costs. We have to have the cost of the training course. We need a conference center to hold the training courses. We need to pay something to use the schools where the courses for the girls take place. Then there are things like books, notebooks, t-shirts for the girls, sometimes food for the girls and food for the volunteers. So it does cost money to run the course. We had a grant, as I mentioned, from the UK government, which was pretty good. It was what they call a community partnership grant. And they were very pleased with the results, I'm glad to say. But the cost of the program, I would say for each girl who benefits, it costs about £35, maybe 40 euros. When we run one of these courses in December in a primary school, there are usually about 50 girls on the course. And each course costs about £600, 700 euros to run. So it's a question of, what would you do to raise money of that kind? Because it's not a huge amount, it's not impossible. Some people run a marathon, some people do swim, some people, row a boat or something, or bake cakes. But an amount like 700 euros makes all the difference. So sometimes I ask people, you know, hey, what can you give us 40 euros? Sometimes I say, can you do something that would raise 700 euros? Because that really makes a huge difference. So if you know anybody who would be interested in doing something like sponsored marathon run or sponsored swimming or anything like that, you know, this is a very, very good cause with a very, very good outcome. And remember, it's for her, this child, and the thousands and thousands of girls like her. They're going to grow up and they have a choice in front of them. One way it would be leave school at 12, get married and get pregnant. And the other way is they can go to high school, they can go to college, they can go to university, and they can become engineers, doctors, teachers. And really, this is what the campaign against FGM is really all about. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. And now I'm going to show you this video which we made, which documented the work of the program. It lasts for 5 minutes, and then after that, if anyone's got any questions, I can answer questions. Okay.
Kararan tumdanya tumdanele kararan ebaman tumdanele nengemagi gosenge tumdanele.
We're in Kipkelion, and that's in Kenya's Rift Valley region. It's a remote mountainous area. Most people live by subsistence farming. They've got their own small farms. There's about 250,000 people living here. A lot of them are young people. And every year there are thousands of girls who reach the age at which they would normally have female genital mutilation.
Kipkelion East and Kipkelion West is prone to FGM, the area. It's a culture that people really have embraced very much. So we are really working hard to have a massive abandonment of FGM.
Increasingly, people are turning away from that. They want something else. So local people have told us that the answer is to have an alternative rite of passage, a different way of celebrating the fact that the girls are becoming women and are becoming adult members of the community. The Alternative Rites of Passage project was devised by Kenyans, by local people, and our role is really to help them, support them by providing the funding for it and helping them to organise it.
It is started by training facilitator. These are local community members who volunteer and help us to train the girls. Some of them are teachers, some of them are even nurses, some of them are parents, and they come from those areas, so they know really what happens when it comes to FGM. So they are best placed and they are able to tackle the issue very well because they have the experience.
They go out into the community and they, first of all, do the process known as sensitization, which means going around and telling everybody why FGM should be abandoned. Secondly, there's the mobilization, which is encouraging parents to send their daughters to the alternative rites of passage instead of FGM. And finally, there's the alternative rites of passage course itself, where the girls go away for a week and they are taught everything they need to know to become strong women.
We are teaching the girls to say no to FGM, the dangers of FGM, the self-esteem, coping with peer pressure, the alternative rights, the traditional rights of passage, and the taboos. We teach about the body changes and development, family and household.
Girl undergoes cut. She matures, and immediately she matures, she's married off.
They drop out of school. They become these young mothers. You are sick. Yes, 14 years having a baby. By 20 years, you can find somebody having 3, 4 to 5 children because of ignorance.
Female genital mutilation involves cutting off the girl's labia and clitoris with a knife.
You can cry, but you are told not to cry. No, even a tear must be seen in your eyes.
alternative rite of passage started as a community need. It was a demand from the community. So FGM was just rampant in this region, Kipkelion East, Kipkelion West. And then I think the program made a success, and then it was changing some lives of people, the community at large. After finishing this program, after creating awareness, people learned, and then after learning, they changed.
At my village, some people still think that it's beneficial based on their traditional knowledge and their traditional beliefs. But I'm glad because most of my friends who came here, they were able to enlighten me. And also, I think I'll also go and enlighten others. I found Madam on the way, and she told me that the course will be starting on Monday. I was told by the nearest friend of mine.
My mother told me that there is a seminar here.
I heard in the church. The madam of the school told us, so when I heard, I urged my mother to come so that I can learn how to abolish FGM.
We were told that when we go through genital mutilation, you will be a grown-up girl and you will not be the same as others. But I've seen so many effects of that FGM, and I've wondered why my grandmother insisted.
As a girl, I can make my own stand and make my own decision whether or not I can undergo this circumcision.
The course have changed our daughters. They were showing that they are changed people. You cannot play with me anymore. I'm not the same girl with you.
She tell me that you may go to FGM. So I tell them no.
We volunteer to teach because we have passion for the girls.
I like these girls, even the girl child. I like girls very much, and I would like women to be empowered, especially in this community of ours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
The funeral industry has been ripping off the public for more than a decade because the majority of people don't know
this
a trick that takes just a few minutes.
Your computer, Michael?
I'm wrong. Is it me?
I was furious.
There's a video.
A couple of weeks ago.
Sounds like the news is on somewhere.
That report.
Hang on, let me see if I can
industry are using
knock this off.
Grieving family.
There we go.
Right, sorry.
That's right.
That was on my YouTube channel, probably, wasn't it?
There are a few questions already in the chat. I don't know whether you can see the chat. The first is from Lewis, although Lewis and Bettina both have similar questions about the reception by the local communities. I don't know if you can read these messages, but what sort of, has there been a backlash from local communities? What barriers have you faced, and how has the organization dealt with that?
Well, we've been quite fortunate in that in Kipkelion, they all pretend that they agree with us. You know, they don't try actively to stop us. In some parts of Kenya, I've heard that the people have actually been, demonstrating and fighting to defend their right to have FGM, which is a terrible thing, and even beating up the people who are against FGM. But in Kipkelion, people all at least pretend that they are in favor of abolition of FGM. So, but sometimes we would say they turn a blind eye. They don't try very hard. For example, we asked all of the chiefs. There are something like 100 chiefs. Each village has a chief. We asked each one of the 100 people, they're all men, are you against FGM? And they said, yes. Then we asked the people, do you believe your chief is against FGM? And some of them said no. And the answer was, he hasn't done anything. about it. He hasn't really tried to do anything to stop it. And he spends, some of them said he spends all his time drinking. But we then went back to the chiefs and said, can you name something you've done to stop FGM? And most of the chiefs then tried to think of something, like they made a speech or something like that, you know. But one chief said he was praying, you know, which I thought wasn't maybe the best answer. You know, it's fine maybe if he's praying, but he could do something else as well.
Thank you. There is also a question there from Amina about how, yes, how the project started, coming from the UK.
Yes, well, it's going back a long time. When I was a student, when I was 18 years old, I managed to get a job as a volunteer teacher in this area, in Kipkelion. And that's how I first got to know the area. But then much later, when I came back to the UK, I went to college, and then I went into finance, and I was working in banking. And then I quit my job when I was a few years ago, and I decided I would set up this organization. And the idea was just to go back to Kipkelion to find out what the needs of the people were. And one of the reasons I was aware that they still had some problems was that in, I think, 2008, there was a lot of fighting in Kipkelion. There was an election in Kenya for a presidential election, and the result was very close, and many people did not accept the result of that election. And there was fighting in many parts of the country, and Kipkelion was one of the worst places for the fighting. So, you know, I wanted to try and help the people. When I got there and I talked to people, including the partner organization we work with, they told me one of the big things they were doing was trying to eradicate FGM. Now, from my previous knowledge of Kipkelion, I thought that'll be impossible, because I knew that it was very deeply rooted, a very strong belief of the local people. But when we started using the alternative rite of passage, we discovered that it was indeed possible to change people's minds, and that there were enough people who were against FGM to give some momentum to do this work.
Okay, there's another question here, is how does your organization work with the victims of FGM? How do they get involved and included in this work, and how are they supported? And if anyone else, just very quickly, if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to send them into the group chat.
Well, we have among the, because FGM used to be very common, it means that most of the older women in Kipkelion did suffer it. So when you see some of these ladies who may be, you know, 40 or 50 years old, and they are leading these courses, many of them are people who suffered FGM themselves. Mm-hmm. So they can speak from their own experience, and they are very strongly supporting it. But there are still the victims, and it's very hard. Often we hear about people having FGM from our links with the local hospital, because people have FGM, and the next thing they have to go to hospital because they're bleeding uncontrollably, or they have an infection or something like that. And occasionally what happens now is the girls at the age of 14, they have the alternative rite of passage and everyone's happy. But when they get married later on, if they're 21, 22, 23, the family of their husband say, we think you should have FGM if you're going to get married. And so sometimes we find there's a risk that FGM is only made, it comes later. Sometimes it's after the marriage. One person told me the mother-in-law is the problem. The mother-in-law will say, you know, the husband's mother will say, you can't cook my son's food properly because you never had FGM, or you won't be able to have a baby because you never had FGM, and so on. So we have to be very careful to make sure that the abolition of FGM continues into the future.
The next question there is from Nabida is, will you be extending the support and the program from Kipkelion to other areas of Kenya?
Yes, indeed. And that's one of the things we're hoping to do this year, to go firstly to the areas neighboring to Kipkelion, because say there are a lot of places within 50 kilometers of Kipkelion which have a similar culture, similar traditions, so it should be quite easy for us to go to those areas and try and bring a similar training to those areas. But that's our dream. It's going to be expensive, so we're going to ask the UK government for more money and try and get some other grants as well. So I see there's another bit of question from Nabida. Let me see.
So just to read the question for the recording, it's the program is aimed at young girls and changing it to an alternative method, but will there be some kind of education for other people, e.g. the MIL, to change their perspective on FGM?
What's the MIL?
Mother-in-law.
Oh yes, mother-in-law, yes. Okay, sorry. Yes, indeed, one of the things that's very important is that we should be inclusive, because sometimes what you really need to do is to teach the older people and also the boys. So one of the things that we've done when we do a survey before and after the training is to ask young men, would you marry a girl who had not had FGM? Because a few years ago, they would all say, oh, no, we want to find a girl who has had FGM. And now they say, oh, no, it's not important at all. Yeah. So we have to include the boys and the men, and we have to include the older women too. You're quite right. And another group, which is very important to reach, are the people who actually do the cutting. Because some of these people, they tend to be old women, and they say, this is my job. You know, I get paid for this. So you're taking away my job and I won't be able to earn any money. And that's quite important. You know, so sometimes I think, you know, because they usually charge about €5 to do it, you know, and so they cut 200 girls, they earn €1,000, which is a lot of money in Kenya. But sometimes I think maybe we should just give them, you know, a few €100 and say, stop doing it, you know. That would be one solution. Another way is to persuade them that they can have a role in delivering the courses and get them to join us and speak out against FGM. But that is something that we're actually actively considering.
So 2 more questions. The first one, adding to the spirit of Nabida's question, what are the options for transferring knowledge to Kenyan authorities so they can take better policies and approaches in combating FGM?
Yes, I mean, the idea of having the alternative rite of passage is not unique to what we do. There are a number of groups in Kenya who do it because it is recognized as one of the best ways of doing it. I mean, I saw once on the TV in London a documentary about some people in Tanzania where they would sort of, if they thought the girls were at risk of FGM, they would sort of take them away from their families. I mean, to me, that's not a long-term solution. You know, it has to be a change of mind, a change of heart. So we work very closely with the teachers, with the health authorities. We do everything we can to spread the word, and you know, I think we are changing people's attitudes.
The next question is from Bridget, is related to funding. Considering the changes to the donor context in the UK with the merging of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and Department for International Development, and the potential recession as a result of COVID, are you confident that you'll achieve additional funding? Do you think that funding for initiatives such as this will lessen as a result of COVID programming?
Yes, indeed. It's a big worry. It's a very large concern. Obviously, the merger of DFID into the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the UK is not a good thing in our view. And also, the recession will mean that the budget of DFID will be cut automatically because it is a percentage of the national income. In addition, most charities in the UK are expecting a big reduction in their income from all sources because people have no money. However, the good news is that FGM is something which many people understand is a serious issue, and it's relatively easy to explain to people why it's important. I think we may be able to get some corporate sponsorship, for example, from companies who want to give money for it. The government, if they give money for anything, will probably want to support this program. So I'm going to apply again this year to the UK government, to DFID or whatever it will now be called, to see whether we can get some more money, maybe another 60,000 euros from them for this year. And in addition, for an example, last year when we needed more money for the courses, and you may remember on the slide, 700 euros for a course, I wrote directly to a number of wealthy people that I know, and I said, have you got 700 euros? And a huge number of them said yes. And one of them said 7,000 euros. I thought it was a mistake, but he said it was, what he wanted to do. So it's a great program. It's really important, and people understand it, and that makes it sometimes easier to raise the money. I hope.
Yes. The next question is from Maria. Have you partnered with other organizations, like, for example, Forward in the UK? As a coach, I am aware of my safeguarding duty in case I suspect any participants may be at risk. Is there any progress in trying to make training compulsory for organizations, and do teachers get some training?
Right. Well, there's an umbrella group for all the FGM organizations in the world, I think, called 28 Too Many. And it's called 28 Too Many because there are 28 countries where FGM can happen. They're mainly in North Africa and the Sahara. And obviously that's 28 countries too many, so that's why it's called 28 Too Many. So we liaise with them, exchange information, take part in their action days. I'm not sure if Forward is one of them or not. It is said that there are over 40 different NGOs working in Kenya to eradicate FGM, incidentally. The safeguarding, yes, obviously it's a massive concern. We make sure that all of the participants get safeguarding training, and we have all the necessary, whistleblowing and feedback mechanisms so that we believe we would know if there was any issue taking place. And I must say, it's also helped by the fact that, in my experience, it is virtually impossible to ever be alone with one other person anywhere in Africa, because you're generally speaking to 10 people at any one time. So that's part of the mitigation. But when you have a government grant, they make sure that you absolutely comply with all your obligations with regard to safeguarding.
Again, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I was just wondering if you could potentially briefly perhaps elaborate on how you think COVID-19 might affect your work outside of the realm of funding.
Yes. Well, it is very difficult in Kenya at the moment because they have a lockdown like most of the countries of Europe, and it's still going on in Kenya. And one of the things that they've said is that the maximum number of people who can get together is 10. And of course, normally we would train people maybe 50 at a time or 20 or 30 at a time. So now we have to have much smaller groups. But what we do is we say one person will train 5 people, and then each of those 5 people can train 5 other people. And by that means you can very quickly train 30 people, but in small groups. So that's one approach to it. Obviously, traveling around the area is difficult. People are afraid to go to any kind of meeting. They're even afraid to go to hospital in Kenya, as they are in many other countries. So that is difficult. And in addition, because the schools are closed, it's difficult to talk to the young people in the context of school, which used to be a large part of what we did. And some of the parents, now that their children are at home, they are thinking, you know, if there's not going to be any education, we might as well find a husband for our daughter. And some of them are also thinking again of FGM. You know, so it's a very bad situation for girls education, for girls having opportunities, and quite potentially a bad situation for FGM as well.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from anyone else? If there are, you can potentially, if it's easier, unmute yourself and ask. We've got time for another question or so. If not, then we will be coming to, I think, the end of where we are. So if you have any final closing thoughts, Michael, or have anything to finish up with before we finish, please.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you all very much, and thanks for listening and for asking such great questions. And if you want to find out more, our website is Friends of Kipkelion. You can easily find us online. The website isn't updated very frequently, I have to say, but we do our best. It's because, you know, we're a volunteer organization. We don't have any paid staff. We don't have any employees. So it's not every day that we update the website with the news. But if you want to find out more, please do. And we've also got another video on our YouTube channel, which is more general about Kellian and the work we do there. So, you know, have a look if you like. And this was just, you know, we set this up, just a group of ordinary people in London who were friends, and we managed to get it going. And the total amount that we have raised in the last 10 years is nearly €1 million. So yeah, it shows you what you can do.
Thank you very much for coming and talking to us, Michael. As you can see in the chat, I think everyone is grateful for your insight. I've also put the link to the web address of Friends of Kipkelion in the chat for anyone who wants to have a look. With that, that is it for this week. Thank you again, Michael. Thank you everyone for coming. We will hopefully be able to edit this and upload it onto the YouTube channel along with our other talks, which are steadily going up there. So if you have missed any of the previous ones, you can catch up. And information on future talks will be on our website, which is asfar.org.uk, and our Facebook page. Other than that, that is it. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you again, Michael, for your talk, for your time. And yes, thank you again. Have a good evening, everyone, a good week, and we will see you at our next talk, hopefully.